It's week 5 of the NFL season, and I've got my uncle, Bryon Backenson, on the show to discuss everything going on in the world of football. We talk parity in the NFL, the Patriots Dynasty, the California Fair Pay to Play Act, Vontaze Burfict's suspension, and make our week 5 predictions. Hope you enjoy it. Alright, well, Cousin Sal might not have been available this week, but I got the next best thing, Uncle Bryon. How are you doing?
I'm okay. This should be fun. I'm looking forward to talking on what here is a night when it's about 40 degrees and raining.
Yeah,
so, perfect football weather.
There you go, New York, where the rest of the earth is going to burn to a crisp. You guys will be a cool 60 degrees when that happens.
That's exactly right. This is South now.
Yeah. So, week 5, we're coming into first 4 weeks of the season. A lot of surprises, I think, but this was something we were kind of talking about a little bit before we started recording, is more than anything else, a lot of parity. We have a couple teams that are, historically terrible, like the Dolphins and the Redskins, and the Patriots and Chiefs are still doing their thing on the other end. But in the middle, we got a whole bunch of teams in that 2-2 range, and we're not particularly sure what to make of a lot of them.
And I don't necessarily even know how strong the Patriots and Chiefs are. This is, both of them could have easily lost this week.
And
this was one where definitely you could have had, any team from, probably 1 to about, 24 on your power rankings could have beaten either or the other. You're right, though. The bottom 5 or 6 are just terrible.
Yeah, the bottom, I think, have differentiated themselves more than the top have, for sure. But, I mean, for our purposes, that makes it a lot more interesting, right, to have things more muddled at the top. Last week in week 4, Patriots against the Bills, Tom Brady had a really poor game, so we're still, the verdict is kind of out on whether or not that's on him or just the Bills' defense being great. It's probably a bit of both. And then the Chiefs in a close one in Detroit as well.
That Patriots-Bills game was the one that was on my TV, mainly because of where I live. And it was a pretty boring game to watch. It was one that was definitely, there was sort of ineptitude on both sides, and sometimes I have a difficult time figuring out which is kind of the fault of the defense versus which is the fault of the offense.
Right.
It certainly wasn't the type of thing where, you could see, like these first 4 games, you can see how good the Bears defense is, just completely disruptive. But this Bills-Patriots game looked a little bit more like ineptitude to me than it did really great defense on either side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that game was actually televised in Houston. So, I mean, they're talking about, kind of the carriage of the Patriots these days. So once I got off watching the Giants and the Redskins, once we put that one away, around the start of the fourth quarter when it just became obvious that the Redskins were going to need a miracle to even reach our half of the field. I was watching the Patriots-Bills game, and again, it was a very close game, but it was just, again, watching it, you very quickly got the sense that, yes, this is a close game, but they're just going to be punting back and forth until the clock runs out. And if the Patriots didn't block that punt early in the game, then they may not have won that game at all. And then when you look at the Patriots, the rest of their schedule of the teams that they've played, they played the Dolphins and they played the Steelers and, another weak team for the third one. Still not a great quality win for New England this season.
No, not at all. I mean, their schedule is sort of lined up with a lot of cupcakes, if you will, for the first, 6-7 weeks of the season. It very much be, looking at 7-1 or 8-0 or whatnot before they even get to some difficult teams. It's a for a team like the Patriots, you sort of look at it and you wonder, what did they deserve to get this gift?
Yeah.
But going back to that Bills game, I mean, it's one of those things where you look at it and you also say to yourself, maybe now this is the time where we start to see, signs of weakness in Tom Brady. And I've sort of given up on betting against Brady. It's always, you look at the way, even just the way he throws a ball compared to, someone like, Josh Allen, who until he got knocked out, was playing against him, and he's throwing the ball on a line. The ball gets to the receiver so fast and so crisp, and then Brady's throwing these what look like lollipops, but they get to people.
Yeah. And there was one play in that game I found particularly hilarious. It was, Tom Brady, he almost threw like a no look, just floated it in the air on one play. And when you're looking at their schedule, though, there's no reason to suggest they're not going to win the AFC East and they're not going to get the first round bye. Like I said, they had the Steelers and the Dolphins. They played the Jets in the Luke Falk game, which I'm sure will go down in the history books as maybe the most forgettable game that's ever been played. And now 4-0, but they have the Redskins, they have the Giants. You always throw the question mark out there when the Giants play the Patriots, but in theory, win-win, the Jets again, and the Patriots could be very easily looking at 7-0. And yeah, I mean, they just roll from there. And of course, they will play a couple, harder games. They'll get Baltimore, they'll get the Cowboys, they'll get the Chiefs, but if they're already 8-9-0 by the point that happens, then it's almost who cares, because they're just going to be coasting to the bye, even if they drop a couple along the way.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where the Patriots are. Well, I guess it's your philosophy of whether or not having super teams is a good thing or a bad thing. But the Patriots have been a super team for almost 20 years now, and you get to the point where are you a little bit sick of it? And right. You look at them and you say, oh man, they're pretty easily going to be probably 7-0 again. And already have a playoff spot probably locked up by the time.
Yeah, in their division, 7 wins might do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a mess. I think the third or the fourth time the Cavaliers played the Warriors, people were questioning, is this starting to get boring? Is this starting to get bad for the NBA? And I think the answer in those situations was pretty clearly not, because we still made such a big deal about the LeBron versus the Warriors kind of rivalry and how that was going on and on for a third season and a fourth season. But if it had gone on for 20 seasons, I think we would reach a point where we would say enough is enough. And luckily, at some point in time, Tom Brady will stop playing professional football. And at that point in time, the problem is the Patriots are just such a well-run organization that they might still be good, but at least there would be a different feeling to it. And that day is coming, regardless of how unlikely that seems.
Yeah, this is one of those things. I mean, I'm older than you are, but I'm still not that old. And I often wondered what it was like when the Celtics basically cleaned up for a decade.
Yeah.
And if it was, did people get sick of the Celtics? Were people rooting against the Celtics at that point in time? It is one of those things where the NBA wasn't the way it is today. But when basically you see a team, win a ring, I don't know, what was it, 8 and 10 years, 9 and 10 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's it just is. I wonder. When we look back in that history of it, I mean, you kind of paint them as a super team, but you don't get a good sense of maybe what the general public sort of felt about them at the time,
Right. Yeah. For the Patriots, really, really interesting to see, how they're going to... I mean, it's amazing they've even kept it going this long. I'm 20 years old. I've been a pretty big football fan since probably the time I was about 4. And in my football watching lifetime, the Patriots have lost the AFC East one time, and that was the Matt Castle year, and they still went 11-5.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how that's even possible.
It really is, and particularly given the fact that team really doesn't have a heck of a lot of superstars.
Right.
They're a team that, is basically Tom Brady and a bunch of guys. It's... They've had, Moss for a few years. They've had, a few other guys that were memorable, but not necessarily what you would think is like, first team all pro type of things. It really does seem like it's a system that just seems to really work. And at some point in time, you would think that someone would figure it out, because all leagues, NFL, NBA, they're all copycats to some extent.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it still works.
Yeah, and I think, at this point in time, it's their defense is carrying them just as much as their offense. And I think something that's really underrated about this Patriots dynasty is how long, not necessarily the players move around a lot, and they keep picking up players, lacrosse players, and people make jokes about you can pick up a Patriots wide receiver at Walmart and turn him into a Pro Bowler, and things like that. But how consistently they've been in the coaching department. They have some coaches on their team. There's a guy that coaches their offensive line that's been in his same position for the last 15 years. So they have so much longevity, and now we've started to get to a point where Matt Patricia was their defensive coordinator for a long time, and he moved to the Lions. And Brian Flores, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, was on that Patriots staff as well. So we have a couple of these guys that are starting to, kind of leave. But for a long time, and really still, they've had tremendous consistency in their coaching department, whereas a lot of these teams, it feels like they scrap together a whole new group of guys every year with their new head coach. He brings guys in. But they've just had so much stability there from a coaching and a management perspective that they have what works, and they've just been doing it over and over and over again.
And that gets to, in some cases, the question of, answering the question of is it coaching versus talent? And this would certainly make an argument that coaching perhaps plays, a pretty strong role and can lead talent that necessarily be as good as some others. It may lead it towards success.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely been at least partially the case with the Patriots. I think you wouldn't have anyone, kind of doubt you or, say anything. The Patriots are kind of known to be the best organization in the NFL. From a management perspective, from a coaching perspective, they find these diamonds in the rough. They have great trades. They're always killing it on draft day. They seem to know, when to buy low and sell high, if you will. So they're doing their thing, and they're still doing it. Tom Brady's age 42 season. They're 4-0. Maybe this was the first game where he maybe looked like he was falling off, but for the last 4 or 5 years now, there have been the Brady games where it feels like every year there's one or two early in the season where we think he's done, and then they just go and win Super Bowls. So I'm not even taking too much from the Bills game. If anything, I moved the Bills up, a few spots in my power rankings this week. I think it says more about, maybe the Bills are going to be one of the stronger teams in the AFC this season. Again, strength of schedule poor, just like the Patriots, but they came into that game 3-0. And once you get past the Patriots and the Chiefs, the AFC is so tremendously wide open. I don't even know who the third best team in the conference is.
Well, and the Bills, again, just like the Patriots, get to play the Jets and the Dolphins twice. So it's, you sort of have a leg up on the competition sort of already.
Right. Like the Bills, even if they're not one of the 6 best teams in the AFC, which at this point I think you would have to say that they are, just by how close they played the Patriots. But regardless, if you can beat the Jets and the Dolphins 4 times, you're probably going to make the playoffs regardless. Because all you got to do is, go 500, maybe not even the rest of the way, and you'll get there.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to us talking about parity in the very beginning of this conversation.
Right.
And there are so many teams who seem like they could beat each other on any given day, and you automatically have, 3, more likely 4 kind of automatic wins. It's kind of a meal ticket in your back pocket that gives you a step up on all the others.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about the wild card race. The entire AFC South is 2-2 at the moment. I think that's incredible. We see the Ravens. They dropped 59 on Miami, and we thought they were going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now they're back down to earth at 2-2. They took a big loss to the Browns. The Browns got killed in Week 1. Now they're 2-2. The Chargers struggled a little bit, but just like so many teams, they played the Dolphins, and now they look good again. It's wide open, and you can go down even further. I wouldn't even count out teams. I mean, Oakland is 2-2, and we don't expect them to do anything. But at the same point, if there's 10 teams at 2-2,
against Indianapolis,
yeah, if there's 10 teams at 2-2, I mean, throw them in the mix.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I think some of this goes back to some of the conversation you had in last week's episode when you were talking a little bit about extending the schedule, but along with that, you talked a lot about preseason games and
Yeah.
watched a handful of preseason, football, just kind of bouncing back and forth. And these guys, the guys who are playing now barely played in the preseason, and you almost get a feeling that with some of these teams, we don't even know who they are yet because they're just still sort of trying to learn sort of first team
Right.
against first
I
team.
I think that's a good point to make because now a lot of the star players they don't even play at all in the preseason, especially if they had even the minorest of, I guess maybe that's not a word, but the tiniest of injuries. They'll hold them out for the entire preseason. So now we're through 4 weeks of the regular season, and maybe that's these guys' preseasons. And now,
I think that's a pretty accurate way to look at it, and we'll kind of, it takes a little bit of time for them to get to know, in some ways, some of the systems that they're playing, and probably more importantly, how people are going to either, defend them, or if you're on defense, how somebody's going to come at you and trying to figure out exactly what you can and can't do. I think from here on out, things will solidify a little bit more, but it goes back to that parity again. Are we really going to have teams learned about the Chiefs, for example? I wonder if they've learned about the Rams, who don't look anywhere near as good this year as they did last.
yeah.
Or is it, have the Rams gone down, or has everyone else sort of figured out the system a little bit?
Right, and you can already see teams that have had really drastic changes over their first 4 weeks of the season. 2 weeks into the season, I was about ready to write off the Bears. They looked, their offense looked disgusting against the Packers, and then they needed to really get lucky, and they kick a deep game-winning field goal to beat Denver, who is still 0-4. And at that point, I was about ready to say, all right, the Bears might not be contenders this season, but they bounced back. They have 2 strong weeks.
And Daniel.
Yeah, and they're doing it with Chase Daniel now, and they'll do it next week with Chase Daniel. And, again, there's been a lot of backup quarterbacks that have stepped up that have played well, and he's been one of them. And we've seen that Jacksonville do it and the Giants do it, and we're still in this feel-out period. You're an Eagles fan. The Eagles looked pretty shaky to start off the year, but they just had one of the most impressive wins in the NFL this season in Week 4. So now they're back on the rise, and they just joined the heap at 2-2, and all of a sudden everybody feels like they're competitive, right? And
yeah, as a Philly fan, you kind of by default have to be pessimistic. And,
yeah.
looking at some of the. Looking at that first game, for example, I mean, that was a tale of two halves. I mean, the Eagles against the Redskins there in Week 1, the first half, they looked absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And then the second half, it's like a switch got flipped. And I thought, all right, that first half was knocking off the rust. And maybe it turns out that you needed, 3 or 4 weeks to knock off the rust.
Yeah, and teams are flipping switches all over the place. I mean, who would have expected that the Buccaneers would have 55 points against the Rams?
Yeah, against the team that has the 2-time defending defensive player of the year, Aaron Donald.
Yeah, and so they go for a franchise record in points, and the week before, they played the Giants and they allowed a comeback victory to Daniel Jones and everything, but they still dropped 30 in that game, and all of a sudden it's like, are the Bucs the best offense in the NFL all of a sudden? And if you're looking exclusively over the last 2 games, you would say yeah, there's just so much that's still left to be decided.
Football's it's become a very, it's changing structurally, I think, in a lot of ways, too. One of the things that I've been looking at some of the over the first 4 weeks is how few, 100-yard runners there are every week.
Yeah.
And again, this is probably something that's changed slowly over the past few years, but it seemed much more noticeable now. I mean, last week you had
Fournette.
You had the one monster week by Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
You had a handful of others of people going over 100 yards, but in the weeks before that, you really didn't seem like you had teams weren't focusing on running at all, and it really makes you. It makes you wonder how the game sort of structurally is changing a lot. and then it goes back to people like Ezekiel Elliott were worth the cash that they gave him.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. It's something that I've definitely noticed over the last couple years. But you're right; it does very much sneak up on you. When I was growing up, and maybe that's funny for me to say I'm growing up when I'm still as young as I am. But just over the last decade or so, a decade ago, this idea of the 100-yard a game rusher, it was such a big accomplishment, and it was kind of this milestone number. But you're right, all of a sudden less and less guys are doing it, and Dalvin Cook has had a great start this season, and Fournette and a couple other guys. But it's becoming more and more rare. And now when you talk about this new breed of running back with the Saquon Barkley type and the Christian McCaffrey type and the Alvin Kamara type, it's not 100 rushing yards anymore, it's 100 total yards. Because these guys are running backs and receivers, and Barkley had a streak. In his rookie year, he went something like his first 12 games, he was over 100 total yards, and that was the thing instead of rushing yards. So now...
Yeah, that's sort of come to, and, where you wind up, in a perfect world, you got that 150-yard guy.
Yeah.
75 ground and 75 in the air, and, maybe a touchdown on either side, and, those sound like fantasy numbers, and they are. But they're... but that really seems like the way that a lot of things are sort of shifting, and in some ways I guess that's probably it's a little bit like the NBA now, where you basically have a bunch of guys with no position,
right.
And when you have a guy who is out there only to run the ball and is not a pass catching threat, or vice versa, the defense knows exactly what it is you're going to wind up doing, and it puts them, I guess, in an advantage.
And I wonder if this increase of running backs as receivers, and in general the rise of the passing game, it used to be maybe 50-50, and now teams are passing on 60-65% of plays. I wonder if that increases the amount of parity that we see, because teams aren't really controlling, quote unquote, controlling the game as much anymore. It's just a whole bunch of passes and a whole bunch of deep plays, and you get lucky and you hit on a couple long touchdowns, and maybe you steal a game that week, and it just adds a lot more randomness, because you can just, if someone breaks open, then you just have an easy touchdown down the field. It's a lot more difficult to do that when you're a more running focused team.
Yeah, and that also could play a role with regards to teams that have great defensive lines, for example, or like interior ones. Again, I think of Donald, and last year I think he played with Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah.
And guys like that. I mean, those little passes out into the flat sort of negates somebody being a really great run stuffer.
Yeah, and you see guys like, Alvin Kamara does it all the time. He just catches screen passes and takes them to the house. Right.
Exactly. So. You're going to have these obviously you're going to have some big rushing games here and there. Like Nick Chubb had 1,000,000 yards last week.
Yeah, but also Nick Chubb broke an 88-yard touchdown. It's like we'll be lucky. We'll see maybe a couple of those this season.
Right. Yeah, the first week, when Saquon Barkley had, he had a bunch of yards, but a whole pile of them came on one big play.
Right, and it's like, I would love to get data on the number of 50-yard rushes versus the amount of 50-yard receptions, because it's just so uneven.
It certainly seems that way.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting to talk about, all the parity going on in the NFL right now. To kind of switch, and this is, technically an NFL podcast, but I do like to broaden it a little bit just to football in general, and that's how we were talking about some of the player safety stuff a week ago. We have a new bill that has been signed in California that could be changing the state of the NCAA. This has been all over the news. And essentially, California has been the first state to pass this kind of name and likeness bill, now allowing college players still not to be paid by their individual schools, but now if they want to sell their jerseys, sign autographs, do endorsement deals, appear in commercials, it would allow for that kind of thing, so they would still be able to make money, if the market deems them worthy of it. So obviously this is going to set off a huge legal battle that'll be going on for, years into the future. But what are your kind of initial thoughts on this and how that could possibly change college football and college sports?
I don't necessarily see a problem with it. It's in some ways, I think this may be a kind of a better way to go about it than paying players sort of through the school. You could say that this is actually potentially a little dirtier. That you might have the guy who runs the car dealership that's going to pay somebody $1 million for a 20-second ad in front of a car somewhere, but that guy's choosing to pay that money. He's a booster, and I would almost rather it be above board than below board. Yeah. And it's the thing I haven't heard about this is whether or not this sort of impacts the whole kind of likenesses for the schools themselves. I remember a few years back with the Ed O'Bannon case for the NCAA when he sued the NCAA. He was a basketball player at UCLA in the NBA later on. But he sued the NBA because he wound up seeing a video game that had him in it.
Right.
And they owned his likeness in perpetuity. And that's just wrong. I mean, that's not something that you should be signing away. I always wonder sometimes with these guys if they walk into the school bookstore, or even if you go to East Bay, or you go to one of these other online places. Hell, just go to Amazon, and you can find a million jerseys with your number on them, and you're not getting a lick of money out of it. This seems like a pretty reasonable way to be able to address that kind of issue without necessarily kind of messing with the fact that the colleges still have to sort of pay for to support other sports at the school.
Yeah,
and that's something that I've kind of wondered. When they talk about paying players and so forth, sometimes I always wonder if that's to the detriment of some of the sports that don't necessarily have big strong revenue streams. But this seems like a way to address that.
Right. I think this is like the common sense thing that should if this bill gets through, and if it gets past all the lawsuits and whatever, and this becomes kind of a nationwide standard deal. This is the common sense thing we should have had all along, in my opinion. Like, it never made sense I understand the argument for why the schools shouldn't pay the athletes, right? And honestly, they probably shouldn't, because they don't. You run into a lot of Title IX issues, where if you're paying the football team, you got to pay everybody, and then that becomes financially. Maybe the University of Texas can afford it, but I'm sure Central Arkansas can't afford it. And so we would see a lot of schools having to cut a lot of programs, right? And maybe it would benefit a select few people, but it wouldn't benefit everybody as a whole. And I think it would probably be more harm than good for college sports. But there's no reason why players shouldn't be able to sell autographs or do whatever to make money in their free time. The NCAA has always had these kind of ridiculous restrictions on it. I remember at the University of Texas when Mo Bamba was here. I mean, you would just walk down the street and everybody's got this T-shirt and it's just a silhouette of Mo Bamba, right? So they're already doing all of this stuff for other people to begin with. They just don't get any of the money from it.
And what this thing also does is it sort of allows, I think in some ways there are individual athletes that sort of break through a little bit in other sports. I mean, we'll always talk about the football and the basketball, which are the big revenue sports,
right?
But even some of the smaller ones, the gymnast from UCLA that made all the
yeah for sure
earlier this year. When Phil Mickelson was a golfer at Arizona State, her name just flew out of my head. A couple of the competitive swimmers for Team USA went to college.
Those Ledecky, right. People like that.
I was Katie.
Katie Ledecky. And yeah, like Victor Hovland, the dude, the golfer that was competitive in the majors this year, but he was still couldn't make any money because he was at Oklahoma State. Yeah, there are other people as well.
And this, I think, will benefit those, and it actually may, in some ways, give them the ability to highlight their other sports. I think sometimes people think just because there's, you play a college sport that you're on scholarship, and that's not always the case either. Mm-hmm. As a baseball fan and someone who follows baseball a fair amount, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people know is that a lot of, Division I schools, not everybody who's on that baseball team is getting a baseball scholarship.
Yeah.
It's like half scholarships or quarter scholarships. And it's something like this can potentially help out with regards to that.
The problem is going to be, getting past the NCAA. But if this is going to happen, this needs to be a nationwide thing. Because as it currently stands, every high school athlete's going to want to go to school in California, right? Mm-hmm. If California is the only school that has the bill, then they have all the recruiting advantage in the world. And the NCAA is currently, they're still, if you make money, they're holding firm on this. If you make money, you're still going to be ineligible to play as always. So that's going to have to be challenged in court. They're also trying to say if you have an athlete on your team that's receiving outside money, you're ineligible for postseason competitions. So they're trying to do as much as they can to try to talk California out of it and try to bully them out of it. But what we're also seeing is people are seeing California do the bill, and they don't want to lose out to California. So now we're seeing this bill, versions of the bill, pop up in a bunch of other states. So it's either going to be the NCAA, or what I think is likelier is it gets passed in enough states that eventually it just kind of overpowers the NCAA.
Yeah, and I guess, one of the things I've heard people complain about with this or suggest is that this is, going to be a corrupting influence and so forth. But I don't know. I tend to think there's only so much money to go around. How many car dealerships are you going to want to give this up? Or,
yeah.
And I don't know that there's going to be a ton of people that are going to wind up. It's not like 50 guys on the football team are going to be able to take advantage of it.
Right. And I love this kind of car dealership argument, but also, wouldn't we rather have this than, college basketball is, in this terrible corruption scandal that's going to, affect tons of schools. And, there's so much stuff that happens under the table that doesn't get made known. And I think, again, the schools don't have to pay the players themselves. I think this is a whole thing about amateurism, and really what it's about is the schools and the NCAA just want to have control over the players. But this is a way that, if you're worth something, then, I don't understand. This should be something everyone is for, because if the market deems that you're worthy and if you can, do something for yourself, good for you, and then the school still doesn't have to pay you. It feels like it should just be cheers all around. But it's not.
No, I agree. I mean, it's definitely something that I've heard arguments that that they're going to get paid more than what their market value actually would be as an incentive for them to come to a specific school, for example.
But I mean, isn't that just what their market value is?
If they want to pay for it, that's what their market value is.
Yeah, there's no difference in I'm not going to pay. That's just not how this stuff works.
Right.
I mean,
right.
LeBron James.
Having some football player come in and do the stand up in front of your Hyundai in your lot is going to be worth more to you than having the local news guy come up and stand up and do a voiceover spot in front of your Hyundai.
Absolutely.
That's the way it is.
And LeBron James has been worth more money to every team he's played on than his salary has suggested. But that is only the case because the NBA has an individual salary cap. They have max contracts. Assuming that the NCAA, that wouldn't be the case, then it's just you would get paid how you would get paid, and that's what it is.
I don't think this particular act sort of touches on it. But one of the things that I've often wondered is, what would happen if a kid, a high school, I'm sorry, not high school, a college basketball player went against the shoe contract for the school.
Oh, that's interesting.
And decided that he was going to wear Nike instead of Adidas, or vice versa,
or big baller brand,
which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
but nevertheless, I mean, I've often wondered how that would go over with regards to this. I mean, that in theory could be part of your likeness in some ways, right?
That's kind of fascinating. Yeah, no, I don't think I've seen anyone actually touch on this issue. Yeah, I have no idea. But, of course, if you have all the companies that are approaching you and there's all these questions if there was a handshake deal with Zion in college or whatever with Nike or, I'm sure these conversations are happening. So, yeah, it's really interesting to, there would definitely be companies that would reach out.
That part of the uniform, that your sneakers are no different than the shorts and jersey that your that your school wears, and it's not like you could choose to wear a jersey or shorts made by a different company, but just the fact that those shoe contracts are worth so much, seemingly compared to the kind of the rest of the uniform, as it were. It always strikes me as something that doesn't seem to make a heck of a lot of sense. Also, as somebody who has never fit well in Nike shoes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we've seen over the course of time, and it really kind of started with Michael Jordan, the shoe rules or whatever in the NBA have gotten progressively much laxer. And now it's, guys are wearing all their signature shoes, and PJ Tucker's wearing multiple pairs of shoes in each game.
I actually applaud the NBA for relaxing that rule.
Yeah.
I think in some ways one of the reasons the NBA has gotten so popular is because of the individuality that they're on the show.
Absolutely.
And being able to, wear different color sneakers or wear some sort of sneakers that have, some cause on them or something like that, or to change them every quarter, like PJ Tucker seems to do.
Yeah.
Is a smart thing on the NBA's part.
And it makes it even stranger that now the NBA has decided to ban these new headbands that people have been wearing over the last couple seasons, where they have these, we
can bring that back to football if we want. The thing that I always wondered about those versus even the, I always wonder when there's stuff that you can potentially grab onto,
right?
Inadvertently or not. I'm dumbfounded that more and more dreadlocks don't get pulled in the NFL.
I've seen it happen. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of surprising. Maybe it doesn't happen more often. Because I don't think there's anything that says you can't.
Right.
No.
Somehow this is the biggest back to Vontaze Burfict, probably.
Yeah,
right?
Let's talk about Vontaze Burfict. Vontaze Burfict, a guy that will get a tackle by any means necessary, except the way is permitted in the rulebook. He's in hot water again, and this should surprise absolutely nobody. But just the very quick background information: Vontaze Burfict, highly talented linebacker for the Oakland Raiders, formerly Cincinnati Bengals, for I think the last 7-ish years of his career. He has been great when he's on the field, but he is very often off the field due to suspensions. It feels like every year he's been suspended for some illegal hit, and it's caused him millions of dollars worth of missed contracts and fines from the NFL. And for the latest one, a helmet-to-helmet hit last week against the Colts, he was ejected in the second quarter, waves goodbye to the fans, and then was given the news the next day that no, he's actually been suspended for the entire season. So, it's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I am, him waving to the fans and blowing kisses on the way out. Plus, his history doesn't exactly make him a very sympathetic figure.
No, I don't think so.
But I am typically sympathetic to defenders. People who are flagged for these unnecessary roughness kind of phone calls in the NFL, and it always whenever the plays are sort of run at full speed, I tend to look at them and I think, or when they really slow it down, and you see someone leads with the head, and usually it seems like that what happens is they're penalized because it's like helmet to helmet hit. And it's only helmet to helmet because the offensive player has already started to move and the defensive player has already committed to where they were going to hit them.
Right.
And it always, I feel sympathy for them because in some ways, once you start, you can't stop. And
well, I think this comes into play a lot in the new roughing the passer penalties, where you're not supposed to land with your full weight on the quarterback or whatever that means. And it almost defies logic because it's like, I'm trying to sack the guy. What do you mean I can't tackle him with all my weight?
Right.
For
some of these quarterbacks that are enormous, it's you need your whole weight.
Yeah, right? So that's been kind of a big problem. I think more than anything else, the Vontaze Burfict thing, he's not getting suspended. This is maybe... I think it's still a pretty egregious hit. I think the guy is going to the ground, and it's a situation where this type of impact was not necessary in the slightest. But if another player does this is probably, he gets ejected from the game, maybe another game suspension, probably max. The reason why this is a full season suspension for Burfict is because just his incredible repeat offender history. This guy this is now, I believe, his 6th multi-game suspension in his NFL career, and he's accounting for, roughly half of this type of suspension across the entire history of the league. So they get this guy again and again and again, and it started out with fines, and they started suspending him, and they suspend him again and again and again, and at some point in time, enough is enough, and maybe we just don't want this guy in the league anymore.
Yeah, I guess I get that, but it's on the other hand, I do think that sometimes people get a reputation, and sometimes it's deserved. I get that, but sometimes their reputation precedes them, and they get punished more harshly because of it. I think about not again to bring up the NBA, but I think about somebody like Boogie Cousins, who seems to routinely lead the league in technical fouls.
Right.
And, I almost get the sense that guy could, say anything and someone's going to slap him with a technical foul just because of his reputation.
That makes sense. If you're a referee, you come into the game and this guy's a troublemaker. So, you might be consciously trying to stop him from causing any problems, so you might be looking to officiate him more harshly in general. And you might just come in knowing, like, wait a minute, this is the guy that this is the guy that gets called for a lot of technical fouls. So maybe when he starts doing something, maybe this is just a technical foul, and you just call it without even almost thinking about it.
And I think Burfict sort of falls into that same category to some extent. I certainly don't want to come off as completely defending this guy because he has done some really horrible stuff. I don't think this one was as bad as some of the stuff he's done in the past. But nevertheless, I do think, in the referee meetings before the game or whatnot, it would not surprise me if there's hey, let's keep an eye on whatever his number is. Right. And, to make sure that, the game doesn't get out of control or someone doesn't get hurt or something like that. Again, it's that play, let's think about some of the others that happened from last week.
Right.
Last week, you talked a little bit about, the couple of players in the
Eagles-Packers game. Right.
I thought the Burfict hit wasn't as bad, perhaps, as the Derek Barnett hit, one that put that took the Packer out on a stretcher.
Yeah.
I thought that one was actually a much later hit than the Burfict one was. And the guy was already wrapped up by somebody else.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that. I think both of them were illegal. I think there's no kind of going against that. I guess the question is, I mean, you have these repeat offender penalties, and you see it a lot of the time with like drugs violations in leagues. Maybe the first time you get a warning or the first time you get suspended in the NFL 4 games or in the MLB 50 games, and then the next time you're suspended for a season, and then the next time you're just out of the league. So it's almost, do you want to suspend guys based off the quality of what they did, or are we gonna move to this kind of 3 strikes you're out system, and it's like, he's committed this many penalties, so now he just doesn't get to play anymore. So it's actually kind of an interesting question, and I think there's good arguments to be made on both sides of this. You want to keep the game safer, but at the same time, I mean, the hit that Burfict made last week, it's ludicrous in a vacuum to suspend him for 12 games.
Correct. So. Let me ask you this. Which is worse? I presume you saw the footage of whoever the Raven was, who basically was grabbing Odell Beckham by the throat.
Yeah.
To me, that's a little bit more egregious than what.
It's more blatant because it's not it's not a quote unquote football move or whatever.
Right. I mean, Burfict was, again, you almost have to see it in real time. With the Burfict play, the guy had kind of caught the ball down on his knees. There was no one around him, and Burfict kind of went in and whacked him.
Yeah, it was kind of a thing of like...
Really kind of a bit of a bang-bang type of play, no pun intended. But, again, and here you have an instance where a defensive player is, basically grabs a wide receiver by the throat after a tackle or a block or whatnot, and that doesn't, I don't know, did he get fined at all?
Yeah, not that I've heard of, and he still maintains that he did not do this, which is ridiculous. It's the interesting part of this is a more blatant action. However, this isn't going to injure anybody. That's the difficult situation, because the football thing, maybe in some cases when these kind of things happen, it's forced or it's accidental or whatever. But even if it's accidental, that can injure somebody, and so you have your rules in place that kind of prevent that. If someone just throws a punch at you, it's like, or whatever, it's not gonna. Yeah, it's not gonna lead to brain damage. It's difficult.
No, I don't. Right, I agree with that. I mean, but again, the NFL to me is so full of different shades of gray, and when you look at, you look at a pass, out into the flat, to set up something, and you see basically a running back, block out somebody at their knees, for example.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly legal. It just makes me. Again, knees are different from the head, but that can tear an ACL or something like that just as soon as any of the other regular blocks or whatnot that happen, or tackles. I'm actually surprised more people don't get hurt in the NFL, but that's another whole kettle of fish. It's I sometimes wonder why certain things are legal and certain things aren't. I guess maybe we would agree that the worst thing of all would be someone taking a non-football action, that could potentially injure.
Right. Yeah, it's so difficult.
We have the Burfict one where a guy, did an on-time tackle with bad form. He could have gone over and touched the guy, and he would have been downed as well.
Exactly. That's the concern. It's not that he had. I mean, it's just it was so unnecessary.
Right. You have the guy you have Odell Beckham getting grabbed by the throat, which isn't necessarily a football play, and then in theory you could have somebody who wouldn't do a football play that could actually really hurt somebody.
Yeah, and it's not immediately obvious what that could. I mean, you could talk about like Ndamukong Suh like stomping people.
Yeah, the stories you hear sometimes from the bottom of a pile
stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the conclusion we reach is, other than just football is incredibly violent, and we've been wrestling with this idea of how to make it safer for literally 100 years. Teddy Roosevelt almost banned football because people were dying, right? And now it's people aren't dying on field anymore, although it still happens occasionally, especially in high school or something like that. But the actions on the field are killing people faster. So we're still trying to figure out how to wrestle with it. And football is as dangerous as it's ever been. It's just maybe not as immediately apparent.
Yeah, it's um, the skill, the athleticism, the speed of athletes nowadays. Just the physics of it, I would assume, would make the hits sort of worth more, so to speak.
And the linemen now weigh 100 pounds more than they used to.
Yeah. And there's only so much you can, again, this sort of gets back a little bit to what you guys had talked about last week, but there's only so much you can do in some ways with, the padding and so forth that you wear.
Right. Like, there's no perfect solution, right? And you can make it safer. You can switch to the flag football league, but, I guess we don't know what the ratings for the flag football league would be, but I'm comfortable saying it's not as high as it is now. Because there are a lot of people that are even upset that Burfict is being suspended present day because they're, this is a hit that would have been perfectly fine when, I was growing up or, whatever.
Well, I can play that game because one of the things that is that I don't think people necessarily do as much anymore, and if you go back and, watch old NFL footage or whatnot, is you can, people tackled by, grabbing them around the waist and around the chest and tackling them.
Yeah.
Now people, lead. They don't seem to try and grab people to pull them down anymore. You try and hit them to knock them over.
Yeah.
And it's when you don't have to worry about that, you can get there a lot faster with a lot more violence.
Yeah, I guess that's why rugby is so much safer.
There was a story this week about rugby and there's some early lawsuits about CTE among rugby players in Australia.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It feels like it's a brutal game, but I think just kind of the maybe it's an urban legend now. But it was kind of this idea that they don't get it's much safer because they know how to tackle each other.
Right. Yeah, but there's definitely some stories. One came out earlier this week about I think one of the first lawsuits about CTE with rugby players, or maybe it's not rugby, maybe it's Australian rules football.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, same type of thing. Violent sport, no help.
Aussie rules has a lot of, and by no means will I claim to be an expert in Aussie rules, but it has a lot of in-air collisions.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
Makes sense. So, I mean, and it should not be surprising at all that now when all the NFL CTE concussion stuff comes out, that other sports that are violent are thinking, hold on, maybe we should do some research on this. So I think in the coming years we'll see a lot more.
Hockey. I haven't heard too much about CTE with hockey, considering the NHL season started last night. We'll give that a little tiny shout out.
There you go.
But that's obviously a pretty violent sport. Lots of concussions in hockey. Lacrosse is at least here in the Northeast, lacrosse is a very big sport. It's becoming obviously a bigger sport as it's expanding that reach. But that's another one where lots of people getting. It's a very violent sport. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So is the future of sports baseball? in a strange way. I don't think you're going to see too many concussions playing baseball.
No, you won't. It's a very So I watched the two wild card games.
Right.
So we should I guess add that we're taping this before the actually in the middle of the first of the divisional games.
Yeah.
But I watched both of the wild card games, and the first one with the Nationals and the Brewers. Watching the bottom of the eighth, and then the top of the ninth for that one when the Nationals came back with basically a bases clearing double to take the lead. It's fall baseball has a certain amount. Baseball has a lot of things that you can complain about for it, but it does create an awful lot of drama.
Yeah.
And each of those individual pitches, even though it seems like it may take forever in between them, the tension and the drama that sort of builds up as to whether or not the guy's going to hit it and where they're going to hit it, and not the guy's going to run it, and so forth is that's something that baseball certainly has going for it. It's all the other time that sometimes is a little difficult. And,
yeah.
I think baseball's time is baseball and hockey, for that matter, have become local sports for the most part. They're not national sports anymore. Mm-hmm. They're local sports for your particular team, and whether or not that's the majors or whether or not it's the minors, that seemingly is what they've become. And for baseball, they do great. At least the minors do great for attendance. Major league attendance was down this year, but they're great ways to spend a summer night. But they don't capture the national attention like they used to.
Well, hockey, I think, is in trouble because the Earth is melting. There's something.
But it is funny. I mean, hockey has a very rabid.
You're right. But it's also. There is no hockey being played in Houston.
It is, however, being played in Arizona.
Yeah, and Dallas and Las Vegas. So I guess there are spots.
And Florida.
Yeah.
In Florida.
Florida. I mean, my God, yeah. They're going to be the first that gets hit by this, but yeah. And baseball is interesting. I'm not as big of a baseball fan as I used to be, and every year I tell myself I'm going to get back into it, and maybe I will in 2020. But I think you're right with the whole. It has a unique kind of intense aspect in the playoffs. Even not being super familiar with all the players. I remember watching when the Cubs won the World Series, and that Game 7 was maybe the most riveting television I've seen, just period. It was unbelievable. So
it has every one of those pitches in kind of clutch situations, and there are many different clutch situations during the course of the game, have a certain amount of drama to them, and in between pitches that just it builds.
Yeah.
And but it can be, I find myself going to a fair amount of baseball games now. We have a minor league team in town. It's cheap, pleasant summer fun. But I find myself sometimes, goofing around on my phone and so forth, sometimes instead of paying attention to the game until you get to some of those dramatic moments.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'm happy we got this rolling on more of a positive note. After all the injury, concussion, etc. News, we're gonna wrap this up really quickly. Just give our picks for Week 5. Got to make sure we get this Seahawks-Rams one in as soon as possible, considering the game starts in 5 minutes from the time where we're recording this. I think.
Are we doing this with a spread?
I can give you spreads. I can do. We can just talk about them quickly. My spreads, I'm dead 500 for the season.
Okay.
So I'm flipping coins. Seahawks favored by 1.5 at home against the Rams, and I guess I'll just give my picks for all of them because I do both. But I got Seahawks against the spread, and I got them winning by a field goal.
I would take the Rams in this game. I think Aaron Donald is this is going to be a time where he's going to try and bust out a little bit.
This could be a revenge game, but at the same point, like you were saying earlier, it's like the Rams they don't look that good.
No, and that was one of the stories of this week that we didn't touch on is people asking about whether or not Jared Goff is all he's cracked up to be.
I did see this amazing stat. He's fumbled in 10 straight games. 10 straight Corollary
to that story is he apparently has little hands.
Oh.
compared to, apparently it's, I don't know how they measure hands, but his are 9 inches, and most quarterbacks are at least 9.5 to 10.5.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, the Dolphins won't be losing this week. They're on bye. As are the Lions. But yeah, I mean, interesting. I think, yeah, I don't know. We need more information on the Rams this year. Giants are 5-point dogs at home to the Vikings, which surprises me somewhat given the fact that the Giants have won 2 in a row and the Vikings look like they have no offense. No passing game, at least. I mean, call me a homer. I like the Giants rolling, and I think the Giants are going to win the game.
I would take Minnesota with the points in this one. I'm not entirely sure that they're going to win the game outright.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. Interesting. I mean, just to see Vikings -5, I don't know. But the Lions are what they are for a reason.
What did you say? The Giants are given 5 or getting 5?
The Vikings are 5-point favorites.
Oh, whoa! Then I would definitely take the Giants. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah.
I thought you were saying the Giants were a home favorite by 5.
No. I looked at that line. And I was Vikings -5. Like, that was very surprising to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Bengals are 3-point favorites at home against the Cardinals. I think both of these teams are pretty bad, but I think I've seen more spark from the Cardinals, so I have the Cardinals winning it outright.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Titans against the Bills. This one's interesting. Titans are 3-point home favorites, so they say it's a push. And just as with the previous one, I have the Bills winning the game. I think I saw a lot from their defense against the Patriots, and I think they do have one of the best defenses in the league. And the Titans are a wildly inconsistent team, and considering they were great last week, I think this week they'll be terrible.
What I haven't heard yet, even in the news up here, is whether or not we're going to get the Matt Barkley experience in for Buffalo or not. If Allen starts, I would pick Buffalo. If Barkley starts, I would want the Titans.
It still has not been announced.
Yeah.
So we'll figure that out.
I think that's that basically.
I think that is reasonable.
It's in Matt Barkley.
I don't think I don't think anybody thinks Matt Barkley's that great. Interesting. Bears favored by 5.5 on the road against the Raiders. The Raiders are looking good, but I still like the Bears to cover.
This is the return of Khalil Mack. He's going to have like a million quarterback disruptions.
Oh, absolutely. Amazingly.
I will take the Bears too.
Last season, I believe, it was either 12-13 or 13-14. But the Raiders had just one more sack than Khalil Mack did individually over the course of the entire season.
Yeah, he's been a man possessed for like the first 4 games of the year.
I mean, it's also just, he has been amazing. But it's also like the Raiders are just, last year they were just terrible. It was like they had 13 sacks, and the next worst in the league was like 24. It was like they were just so far in the gutter. It was unbelievable.
And this one we should add, by the way, is not necessarily straight home road. This was the one in London.
The Saints-Bucks, right?
No.
Is the Raiders-Bears in London?
Yeah, that's on my screen is Bears in London.
Okay. I just knew that the Bucks were in London. I knew the Bucks had a... Oh, okay, sorry. The Bucks are the road team here. So the Bucks have a home game in London, so maybe that's next week.
Okay.
So yeah, I knew that, and that's why I just assumed.
Yep.
But so Saints are actually home against the Bucks, and this is so interesting to me. The Saints are 3-point favorites, so this is another one where they're saying neutral field push essentially, which speaks to, I mean, the Saints just beat the Seahawks and the Cowboys. Like, the Saints are looking amazing. This speaks to how good people think the Bucks might be.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
But, again, remember the Bucks threw up, 55 last week?
Yeah.
But I'll take the Saints, too.
I will as well. Eagles -13.5 against the Jets. I'm going to take the Jets with the points because I do think Sam Darnold will play, but I don't think the Eagles should have too much trouble.
I will follow your exact lead on that. I think the Eagles are going to have a lot of close games. I think they may win them, but I think they're going to be closer than they should be.
Yeah, I have them winning by 9-10 points.
Yeah,
it's simple enough. Steelers and the Ravens. Ravens 3-point favorites on the road. And this is an interesting game. They've come off 2 losses in a row, and the Steelers did pick up their first of the season. I still think this is one where the Ravens defense might just feast against Mason Rudolph. So I'm going to take the Ravens to win, and I'll give the points to the Steelers. And I think they'll cover.
I'm going to go with the Steelers, I think, in this one.
Okay.
The Steelers figured a little something out last week. They did a little bit of wildcat. They did a little bit of non-traditional type of stuff here, and they had some success with it. So let's, what the hell, we'll roll the dice for another week.
Yeah, why not? I don't think you'll be rolling the dice with the Redskins against the Patriots.
I'm actually surprised the spread on this is not larger than it is. This one's about 14, right?
Yeah, I'm reading 15. I think the Patriots are just going to destroy them.
Yeah, the only thing, they're playing in Washington, but I think I would take New England.
I think New England will have more fans at this game.
And I think New England will probably try and stretch their legs a little bit after last week's not so great game.
Yeah. Panthers facing the Jaguars. Couple 2-2 teams. The Panthers are favored by 3.5 at home. I have them winning by 2 points.
This is both teams starting quarterbacks that you never even probably heard of at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely not, unless you were someone that follows college football and you fell in love with Minshew back then. But no.
I'm going to go with the Jaguars.
This was a close one for me.
I believe in the Minshew.
I believe in him as far as just being like a leader and just being this guy that everyone's going to rally around. I'm still not sold on him being a great quarterback.
Well, I've got the pixie dust from watching that little play in the pocket with him and the Broncos that made all the highlight films this past week. I also have always been a Fournette fan. Fournette is like the Greg Oden of the NFL.
Yeah,
he looks like he's about 50 years old, but he's like 22 or 23.
Yeah. I think Fournette's pretty overrated, and so I ate my words last week. But I think over the course of his career, I think he's not been as good as expected.
No, well, he's been a little brittle.
He's been quite brittle. Yeah. Texans playing the Falcons. Texans at home, -5. The Texans have struggled really heavily at home so far this season. So this is another one where I'm going to take the Texans to win it outright, but not to cover.
I'm going to take the Texans to win and the cover. I think Atlanta is crumbling.
Yeah, they might be.
We'll see.
I don't know, still beat the Eagles.
No, yeah, right. So did the Lions.
Yeah. Chargers favored by 6.5 against Denver. I believe this will be the Melvin Gordon debut. Yeah. So I think this is a case. The Chargers started off pretty poorly this season. They get Melvin Gordon back. They had an easy win over the Dolphins. I feel like this is prime time for them to start rolling, get their momentum back. So I like them big.
And Denver just lost Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For the I confuse him with the other Chubb.
Yeah.
They just lost him for the season.
Right.
I would all over the Chargers on this one.
Yeah.
It was one of only 2 4:00 games this week.
Hey, how about it? The other one, America's Game of the Week, as you'll hear on Fox. Cowboys hosting the Packers. Cowboys favored by 3.5. I think this is relatively unquestionably the game of the week. It's either that or the one that just started. But I like the Packers to take this one. Actually, I think they lost a real tight one, and I don't think they're going to lose another tight one again.
Yeah, the Packers outplayed the Eagles in that game.
Yeah.
And they have, in essence, a 10-day layover before this game.
Yeah.
Even though they're road, I think they'll do pretty well.
You'll be happy to know that Eagles fandom is still strong. I had an Eagles fan not happy about my Week 5 power rankings. He was adamant that the Eagles should be above the Packers.
and that fan wasn't me?
No. Yeah, surprisingly. And then I looked at the guy, and his Facebook cover photo was the Philadelphia Eagles. So.
Well, at least he's consistent.
Yeah, right. Chiefs against the Colts. Chiefs favored by 11 in this match. I think it'll be a little closer than that, just because the Chiefs have no defense, but I like them to win.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the Chiefs outright in this one.
Okay.
It's at Kansas City, which is sort of notorious tough place to play. The Colts are a good team, and Brissett is not that much of a drop-off than it's a drop-off.
Not as much as expected, maybe. Yeah.
Right. But I think just like the Patriots game, I think Kansas City may be wanting to run it up a little bit after something that was a little too tight last week.
Perhaps. Monday night we have a team coming off a bye, the undefeated 49ers, which I'm not sure anyone expected, home against the Browns. 49ers favored by 3.5, and you know what? We just saw a huge matchup from the Browns last week, and maybe I'm just a big fan of the team, but I think the Browns are coming, and I like the Browns to take this one against maybe a sleepy 49ers team.
It's actually it's the rare good Monday night game.
Yeah, right.
Paper, and I think I would probably wind up going with gun to my head, I would take Cleveland in this one as well. I'm not completely sold on San Francisco shouldn't be undefeated.
Yeah.
And this will be where the bubble gets popped a little bit. I think it'll be close. I don't think San Francisco is a bad team. But like you, I think Cleveland has taken a little bit of time to warm up, and they'll be. I think they'll be raring to go.
Yeah. So that's the end of our picks. Hey, the Cleveland Browns. The AFC North is so bad. The Cleveland Browns have the tiebreaker. They're leading the division right now at 2-2. So this is just them. They're just gonna keep rolling.
We shall see.
It's unbelievable. Browns for the playoffs.
Well, and they had they have over 500 yards of offense last week.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham only had 20 of those.
Yeah, unbelievable. They're. I mean, this was the game that really proved that they could do something. Like, good congratulations on beating the Jets. That wasn't that impressive. But the Browns' offense had been very, very shaky over the first 3 weeks, and then this one, all of a sudden, it's like, you know what, these guys might have something over there.
Yep.
Yeah. So, good stuff. Got all the Week 5 predictions in. Get all my predictions, my power rankings, and all of my writing about sports on Medium.com. I am at Connor Grohl there. I am at Connor Grohl on Twitter. Thanks for listening to the show. Brian, you have any last words?
Who's winning the World Series?
Who's winning the World Series? The Houston Astros are winning the World Series.
I think you're probably right. This is good. The Astros Rays series is going to be a very good one if you like pitching matchups. I think it goes Glasnow, Verlander in the first game, and then Snell and Cole in the second game, and then Morton and
Greinke
starter in the third game. I mean, it's going to be it'll be tighter than you think, but I think if they get through that, I think they should steamroll from there.
I mean, I don't think it's a homer opinion to say that the Astros just look absolutely stacked everywhere.
They do. But don't rule out Tampa. Tampa's not a bad team at all.
Yeah, and baseball, we'll play a million games and then we'll decide it over the next 5, so.
We could get into that at some point too, right? 162 games and then you get a wild card.
The wild card game is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's just how they do it.
In my perfect world, that would be best of 3, and then divisional would be best of 5, and then World Series.
Yeah. Oh well.
So,
thanks for coming on.
Certainly.
Yep, and enjoy the games this week, and enjoy, I guess, all the games: football, baseball, hockey, the whole deal.
And preseason basketball.
This is the month, October. Everything starts happening.
And the WNBA finals.
That's right. We're still rolling in that.
It's exactly right. There's no shortage of good things to talk about.
Absolutely no shortage. So enjoy it all, and everyone watching or listening rather enjoy it all as well.
National Wrestling League.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff. Look, if you got free time, sports. This is the month for sports. All right, we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, and see you guys.